Hi, everybody. It's me. If you like my channel, please like and subscribe. There's a notifications bell down in the corner. If you hit that, you can get notified as to when I'm going live. With that being said, there's a short description as to what I'm talking about and ways that you can support me in my mission. So, today, talking about a subject that some feel very uncomfortable with, and that is flying a sign. Some of you might know it as panhandling or spanging or begging, but whatever the term, there are significant differences in the way people think about this and the truth of what it actually is. Now, before I was an adult and homeless, I don't, I think I was like the majority of people I talk to who really just don't understand the gravity you can find yourself in. And I think that lack of understanding leads to a lot of stereotypes. And I think sometimes that these things get lumped in together when they're not. And coming from a place of experience, never thought I'd be there. And I remember the first time that I was going to get trained because, believe it or not, it is very difficult to sit in a spot, and especially, hi Trevor, if you're not used to being degraded or being humiliated or any of those things. It's easier if you have a friend with you, somebody who's friendly, somebody who can, you know, teach you to not smoke while you're panhandling, um, teach you to not get angry when people say mean things, to hold your tongue. There's ways that you go about it. So I didn't understand this. I had just landed under a bridge. But here's the thing. I had nothing. Zero. Only my camera. And I wasn't about to pawn or sell it or anything else because that wouldn't have gotten me enough money to do anything with. And it was much more valuable to me in my possession and being able to document my experience. So that was a real piece of something I held on to. So it was life saving for me to have that thing. I wasn't about to get rid of it. Thank you, Sherry. Yeah, Megan. Yeah, exactly. If you're not used to being degraded. Um, so I hear a lot of times people make the mistake. Oh, I was sorry. I lost track because I was dealing with that. So the first time my son goes, "Hey, who's going to go teach her how to spange?" And it was after I had gone to the they all went with me to the Brain Injury Alliance and I got a social worker who was helping me make, my primary care appointments. My son made sure that got done. And he's like, who's going to teach her how to spange? And Austin and Gypsy and Derek, they were right there. And, you know, I had to go and learn. And one of the things that they said was, let your homeless fly. And of course, I had no conception of what that meant. And what that meant was, I'm a clean cut person by just nature. And so for me to fit the stereotype of what was going to amount to getting enough to survive on, you had to do something to where you fit that stereotype where people weren't like thinking, they're still going to think you're a scam artist. I mean, that's the way that goes. The people that think people are scamming, they just do. It's a thing. But it was a way of almost like a marketing, on a real low key, trying to get people to invest in you, invest in your situation, invest in your cause, which at that point, your cause is survival. And I don't know how many men would drive up while I was spanging and tell me you're too pretty to be out here, as if looks had something to do with it, as if I was going to use my looks to do something that I felt was even more degrading than holding a sign. And I think part of that is that stereotype of, well, I would never. I would make this choice. But the problem with that is we don't know what choices that we have until we're there. And in the situation I was in, that's where I was. There was no way to fill out applications online with an address and phone number. I didn't have one. There was, I was sick and I was getting my meds changed. I was getting better. I was getting medical treatment. But that allowed that I couldn't hold a position. I couldn't have made it. I was going to excessive doctor's appointments. There were reasons. And people would walk up and they would talk to me and they would go, well, you're intelligent enough to not be out here. But they didn't understand and they didn't know. And it was luckily the ones that talked to me, hopefully I could enlighten them as to situations that could lead to there. But I just have an issue with that getting, oh, thank you, Sandy. Hi, Lasai. Um, with harassment. And I hear a lot of times people saying, well, what about the people that chase you down? And that's somebody harassing you. That is very, very different than trying to advertise yourself, make yourself stand out, to get people to invest in you, to believe in your worth to survive another day. Because that's what it is. It's people believing in your worth, that you are worthy to survive another day. You are not making, I don't, of course we all have those urban legends of somebody that's, like making bank or, living in the high rise. And I'm sure at some point, I don't know how they do it. And I don't know anyone that has. I remember the elusive hundo, and that's what they would, me, that's what we would all call that elusive $100 bill. It was the dream. It would get talked about for months about how this one guy, if you were there at the right time, he was passing out hundreds. And then one time it was 50, and it was the excitement of that, of the elusive $100 bill, should tell people something. Literally. And it should never be equated to harassment. Harassment, no one has a right to get in your personal space. But please do not equate legal behavior, asking for help, with harassment. Now we're going to talk about scams. And I guess here's the thing. What do you consider a scam? Is it somebody being dishonest on their side? Because I will tell you now, I have known people to write drugs and alcohol, even though they didn't want drugs and alcohol, because it garnered more money, because it fit the stereotype of what people wanted. The same way that advertisers target us. They study our behavior, they study our stereotypes, they study our biases, they do all of that and target us. And so in that community, they're doing their best. They are not advertisers, and sometimes it's blatantly obvious. But that's exactly what they're trying to do, is to get people to invest in their worth. And then of course there are they're going to use it for drugs and alcohol. And what I have to say to that is, if you want to control the money that you spend after it has left your hands, then do not spend it. because I don't think that's a thing. And you would be shocked at what people spend the money on, because a lot of times it might be enough for that big sandwich for everyone to share, or a bunch of fried chicken, so everybody can share that. You don't know. And to assume is so wrong. And here's the thing, we don't get to decide. If you're going to invest in somebody, invest in somebody. Um, well, yeah, but that's, Megan, that's not panhandling. Somebody walking up to your door and demanding money is not panhandling. Both are harassment. Both is illegal. I am talking, that's the separation we need to make. We need to quit lumping in legal activity with illegal just because we don't like it. And if we want to fix it, then we have to provide for people. So if I haven't read, okay, thank you, Sherry. Um, so anyway, now we're on to harassment. Now we're on to scams. And like I was talking about, there's always the elusive urban myth. And no, Kate, it's not about the fake babies. That is, but the thing is another thing, it doesn't, if that is what they're about, fake babies, I would love to talk to them and find out what this is about, because a lot of times a conversation can cut out all questions. Um, and if you don't, like I've said, if you don't want to give money, and if you feel uncomfortable, anyone, if you feel uncomfortable giving money, do not do it. Don't do it. But find out the story. Give resources. You can. I watched a man for 4 years fly a sign, so one day I went to Dunkin' Donuts and purchased a breakfast combo with a coffee and took it to him, and he threw it back at me. Okay, Tyra, I feel that. Everybody's had bad experiences. How many good ones have you had? I mean, that's a real question. How many good experiences have you had? Or does that one just stick out with you? Because I would say honestly, and I do a lot of outreach, okay? I am connected with my community. I try to be as, I'm sick a lot, so I try to be out there as possible. But I can tell you right now, there are some really messed up stories and bad experiences, but those are more like prominent because they're crazy and they're out of the norm. They're outliers. They're not the norm. It's, like with Sheila, we were out and I told her, I said, go up and ask. And then we helped that family in Walmart. And then later she took my advice again. And she went up to a guy who had a sign and she's like, well, what do you need? And he's like, my needs are none of your effing business. And she was like, oh my. And I was like, yeah, but you'll get one of those out of I don't know how many. And you know what? Respond. If somebody's rude, whatever. But that doesn't mean that that's the whole population. And it doesn't mean that, and that's the whole thing with scammers, what do you consider a scam? Are they carrying fake? I mean, if the babies are obviously, if we're going to talk about the fake babies, if the babies are obviously fake, someone needs to just know what's going on. Like maybe they have some sort of weird thing. Like maybe it's not even related to homelessness. Like we have a lot of people from different, cultures and faiths and everything else out on Seattle. And, I, one of the things if they have children is I always say, do you have shelter? Because I know they can go to Mary's place and I'll direct them there. Or I'll say, do you have food? And I have a list of food banks that they can go and get some food. And most times they say yes. And that means that they probably need those funds for other things, whether that be clean underwears or whether that be that elusive fried chicken meal for camp or whatever it may be. Um, Megan, I gave someone a banana on the subway the other day and she said thanks. Yeah, that's another thing, actually, I was supposed to go to harm reduction today. We pass out hundreds of things. We serve in 2 hours, probably 50 some people. Never been cussed out, told thank you a million times, been hugged. I can't even number the amazing experiences that I've had during outreach. And I will tell you right now that not once during outreach have I been in danger. I was in danger during homelessness, but during outreach, never. And the reason that I was in danger during homelessness is, of course, you have to be out at weird hours and, sometimes you're catching the later bus. There's just, or you're in areas that, you have to be in. Sometimes it sucks. Grampy Campy is a scammer. Okay. Well, for me, I look at a scam. And when I look at someone running a scam, I would say that I look at Bernie Madoff as running a scam, Incest Pharmaceuticals as running a scam. I don't consider less than a million people, only of which a portion of panhandle, a scam. And yes, there are people that write, I'm a vet, please help me. And they are not a vet, but they are unhoused or they are somewhere else where they have to have their needs met. Well, right. It does make it hard for the ones that are really in need and need a hand. But here's the thing. You decide long before. And that's why people, and that feeds right into why people, and yes, Megan, nobody's cool with people lying. But the issue is how many of us are very confident in our ability to tell without getting the whole story, without knowing that person personally. Steve, I did panhandle when I was homeless. I did ask for work at restaurants to eat, and I was capable of working back then. I went to labor pools. I slept in shelters that stink and were dangerous. Yeah, I wouldn't do a shelter. No, I agree. No. I had a camp full of wonderful, badass human beings that, of course, we all had our issues, but we were safe there. We had our own space. Um, we looked out for one another. And I never was worried about being assaulted while I slept or, after a certain point. I think that when you're first out there, that's why many people have, severe anxiety is because it's very anxious until you find somewhere that you feel okay. And for a lot of people, that's not even a thing. They don't get to feel okay. But we're going to go back to talking about the elusive scammers. And here's the thing, if you know it's a scam, just don't give. I'm pretty sure, and that's with anything, you know, I would rather, if I'm giving, I don't even, if somebody looks uncomfortable and I don't, um, I, June, I don't know what that is. Okay, just a moment. Anyhow, so I was going back to this flying signs. I never thought that I would. I never thought that I would be there either. But I will say that as much as we talk about, of course, we might get kind of treat people like people. Um, it just I know that the signs that I held, for the most part, had to be very simple. Anything helps. I remember holding one that said, invest in people, not war. See homeless. That one people would stop and take pictures of and be like, yeah. And I made very little money on that. That I had to change signs to anything helps and hearts because that made, apparently that was too much. And it's again fitting the stereotypes. And I really think that in the end, when we look at these things, we have to make distinctions. If somebody's scamming and somebody is lying, then they are a liar and scammer. And they should be reported. But the issue is that is not flying a sign. Flying a sign may mean that you have to get a little dirty and mess your hair and wear, something, you know, a little dingy sometimes. But that's fitting stereotypes. And if people want to, think that's lying, then whatever, you do what you got to do. But in the end, just like we choose our stocks and bonds, we choose what we're going to invest in. Okay? If we don't like a company and we feel that they're a little shady, do not invest in that company. It is the same thing with people. And I will tell you now that that investment in me kept me alive. It kept me being able to survive enough to not wear myself out enough to where I could get medical help and get to where I am today. If it had not been for that, I literally do not know what I would have done except forego medical treatment. I would have had to. And I would still be out there because I wouldn't have gotten the medical treatment. I wouldn't have gotten on the list. I wouldn't have gotten the help that I needed to be able to understand paperwork, to be able to speak in a way that I was understood and heard. So that's where I'm at with that. You know, I think and I know Kate thought that I was talking about the one situation, but oh, I'm not. I'm talking about the millions of situations that I hear about people flying signs. And as someone who has been there, I want to thank every single person from then until now that has invested in me because I have tried to do the absolute best I can with that investment as a person and out in the world. And I think that understanding that can hopefully open up some compassion and empathy, not for the scammers, but for the people who legitimately that you believe and you want to invest in them. Invest in them. Talk to them. Pick someone. It doesn't, you can be, you can go and pick anybody. Just pick someone to invest in, whether that be time, whether that be conversation, whether that be a cup of coffee, whether that be 50 cents, whatever that may be. You know, invest. Invest food. Invest water. Because with all of that, you really are investing in that person and the belief that they believe that they deserve to live another day, survive another day, and make it easier because that's what that's about. But no, okay, I wasn't necessarily talking about that situation, but that is a good situation, to talk about. But here's the thing. If they're visibly fake babies, I wonder if it has something to do with something they believe. Rather, I don't know. I really don't know. I know that I watched that whole, like, there was an episode on TV I watched of people getting babies made that are like really lifelike and carrying them around and stuff. So I mean, maybe it's one of those groups. I don't know. It's actually a thing though. Um, they have like groups and stuff out there for that. I mean, and I guess they say that it supposedly helps people with trauma from loss of children or the inability to have children. So I don't know. The thing for me is, if I don't want to invest, I don't. But for the most part, I want people to survive another day, whether that means giving out harm reduction supplies or outreach supplies or compassion resources, whatever that is, or education. That's what you want. Yeah, there's tons of scams. Great. Old mucker. I mean, that's the thing though. What are you looking for in life? You know, we can recognize lying and we can recognize scams and move on. You know, of course there's loads of scams on the internet. But there's also amazing things on the internet, I would hope, because I am on the internet right now and I'm freaking amazing. So, I mean, come on, we have to use critical thinking, you know? Um, so, whatever, do you. But just please talk to people, find out, invest a little time. And as far as I want to say, Kate at Fast Pup Dog Training does that. She really does invest a lot of time and energy into helping people. So, anyhow, are there any questions right now? Anybody? Okay. I would disagree with that too. Um, that who How would we build any kind of social support if we never trust anyone? We use our critical thinking. We use our discernment. We cannot. I mean, I could never go through life just saying I can't trust anybody. There is a certain level of trust that is maintained between outreach, even in humanitarian work, and I really just cannot agree with that. I think that we should all learn how to be safe. I think that we should all learn tools, tricks, and tips, but I don't think that we should never trust anyone. I think that I am blessed to have, in my life, you know, have built a support network and social sphere of people that are very trustworthy and loving. And if I hadn't have met them through whatever means I met them through, they would not be in my life. So there's that. I also wanted, it was really hard to make a decision today whether I was going to talk about trauma informed care or, panhandling and stuff like that. But I will be back on later, maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow, on trauma informed care as well. So, next thing, big thing, it is winter. And there's a reason I posted that sign up, the one I used to use. Number one, totally ineffective. Again, had to switch to a simpler sign. I even had, apparently, and I was not watching TV at the time, there was a Game of Thrones episode, and their whole tagline was "Winter is coming." And my sign said "Winter is coming" because winter was literally coming. And so, I was like, oh, hi, always smile, sending love back. So what I want to talk about, again, winter is coming. So what we need are sweatshirts, socks, warm pants, coats, shoes, anything winter gear, tents. We have a lot of people outside is hard when it's cold. And it's about to get cold here in the next month or so. So we want to start getting the word out and look up your local agencies, look up what you can do to help. And of course, I have my Amazon wish list down there. Another thing I would like your take on is the idea of asking what people want instead of assuming what they need. Food. My hardship is that people tell me what they need and then I can't find them later. That is difficult. That is a very, very difficult thing. Mainly, here's my take on that is I go out with what I have in outreach. In other words, whatever I'm stocked with, whether that be water, whether that be, soft biscuits, whether that be harm reduction, whatever. And when I ask them what they need, I'm saying, what do you need that I have right now? It's a lot of times I do, like, okay, for example, a, a caveat, an exception to that was when I asked Devin and Dee what they needed and put, like shoes up there, on the wish list. That was a little different. I know they're staying put. Yeah, all of that cake, all of that cake. Um, and I knew they were staying put. But for the most part, when I go up to see what somebody needs, it has to be within my capability of that moment of providing that need. Um, Very rarely, it is a very, people are getting swept constantly. People are moving constantly. So it's a very hard population until like a network is built. And that's just, building that network of so and so knows so and so that knows so and so that this person goes here. And that's very hard as well. Um, this is why it's easier to get help, UND, maybe Gypsy to get stuff through you guys. It is though. It is. And that's why like when I get really large donations and I know that I can't get them out, I immediately contact Seattle Homeless Outreach and they hike up in. And so they are a great outreach for that, for like large donations of supplies. Um, or like if it's like dog supplies, I always call Laura at Seattle Dogs Homeless Program. If it's harm reduction supplies, you know, um, Seattle Harm Reduction Coalition, if it's, you know, yeah, so those are the main ones. Gypsy doesn't really hand out stuff. What I will say though is Gypsy plays another very important role. She does, against my advice, what I do not do, and that's sometimes let people crash and have a safe place for a while, and sometimes to the detriment of her personal space. So I do try to keep. There are homeless individuals that she helps out with some things. So I do try to keep her stocked because those are the people that's her outreach. Um, but believe it or not, she's actually kind of shy, and so she doesn't really like going and approaching people. And yeah, Dee's great. She knows especially the RV population and industrial. And again, very, very, people get swept very often there. So it's good to have those connections as to people who know people. So, and of course, I'm always willing to take out supplies as I can or get them to where they need to go. Um, I'm here. So anyway, my PayPal link is underneath, and there is a wish list up there with outreach supplies. I have pretty much everything labeled as to what is needed. Um, so thank you guys. Thank you so very much. I appreciate you guys and sending so much love out. So I will talk to you later. And I believe my next one's going to be on trauma informed care because it's so important. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.